last year's pipeline report. For the very first time, we released it in September. I know we keep plugging the fly-in, but yet again, we released the pipeline report at the ATEC fly-in in Washington, D.C. We were able to do a media release on Congressional on the Hill, big splash, so that was pretty fun. If you were at the fly-in, you got early release information there. I think we'll do some of that, plus some new stuff, because obviously Oliver Wyman isn't just about ATEC pipeline report. They do a lot of other really great forecasting information, so we're happy to have them here. So Livia Hayes, Director, Oliver Wyman Vector, and Devon Holden, Technical Specialist. Devon, we work a lot with Devon day to day, so when you have questions about your surveys or you're having issues, we work really closely with Devon to get that information into the analysts' hands and published. So happy to have you ladies here yet again, and I'll turn it over to you.
Cool. Thanks for having us. One more time, my name is Livia Hayes. I'm Director at Oliver Wyman Vector, and Vector is a technical aviation-focused consultancy within Oliver Wyman. And I lead our market intelligence group. We produce industry-leading reports and forecasts, including the Global Fleet and MRO forecast, our MRO survey, which Devon also works on, that's forthcoming. It always releases the week of the MRO conference. And for the past couple of years, we've been fortunate to partner with ATEC to work on their pipeline report as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the forecast, and then I'm going to hand it over to Devon. As Crystal said, she's really the one in the data and is understanding the trends that we're seeing. So I'll let her introduce herself, and then we'll get going.
Okay, this working. Hi, like I said, I'm Devon. I'm on the market intelligence team at Oliver Wyman. I do mostly work in data analytics, and this is my second year working on the pipeline report, although we were just talking earlier. It feels like we've done it a couple times because of the flying.
It feels like forever.
It feels like forever that we've been doing it. And I just want to say thank you to all of those that take the survey. I'm the one that's digging in there, and I really appreciate the time and effort it takes.
Yeah, and it was Crystal's idea to put us last and put like 30 slides between you and your beverages. So we'll try to go fast. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about what we see forthcoming in the industry as a whole. We'll talk about the shortage. I know you all are tired of hearing me talk about the shortage. Going to be talking about the shortage for the next 10 plus years. And then we'll hand it over to Devon to talk about the pipeline report insights and key takeaways. At the end, if we have time, we can answer some questions if there are any. And if not, we can always just reach out to us. So, first, I know who feels this, that we're way beyond the previous highs in the industry that we reached in 2019. I know last year we came and we said, hey, we're back to the levels that we were at. This year we're way beyond, especially here in North America. Both domestic and international traffic in North America is way above where it was in 2019. Globally, that's also true with the exception of international traffic in Asia Pacific. So, given that we're beyond where we have ever been historically, what do we see for the next 10 years? We see growth, and although fleet growth isn't too strong, MRO growth, which is repair growth in your aftermarket needed to support the flying fleet, is going to outpace fleet growth for the next 10 years. Why is that happening? So we know that there have been production challenges at Airbus and Boeing since about 2018, and we know that operators are having a hard time getting their hands on enough aircraft to fly the schedules that they want to fly. What that means is that older aircraft are staying in service longer, they require more maintenance to deliver the same reliability, and they're also flying them a little bit harder. And that's coupled with new challenges on new fleets that are entering in that are having maintenance occur prior to when we maybe were planning on it. An example of that is the geared turbofan engine problems. We also know that those aren't the only engines with some challenges earlier in their lives than expected. All of this adds up to what we're calling an MRO supercycle that here in North America is over $27 billion this year, driven by those demand and price increases, and will continue throughout the 2035. Okay, so what does that mean for the number of workers that we need here to accomplish this work? So we have more work than we thought we would have, and we also have fewer workers and more workers set to retire over the next 5 years or so. So this year we're about 9% short, and we expect that to double over the next few years. Eventually, after 2030, you start to get some benefits from new aircraft coming into the fleet that need less maintenance, but even then, you only go back to about equilibrium right now. So we're projecting that deficit to be about 17,000 in 2034. This is also, impacted, we've talked a little bit about today about the inexperience of the new entrants. So we've talked about that they go directly to operators instead of spending a few years at MROs. That's reflected in this year's MRO survey, where operators are saying that they are no longer facing a worker shortage, but MROs are still citing a worker shortage as an issue. But the other thing that we see is that it takes about 2 to 3 years for those new entrants to be productive. When we take into account for that productivity gap, the shortage gets even worse. And then, as we talked about today, maybe some of the sources of workers that we were relying on, maybe international students, international workers coming across, that may also exacerbate the situation. So, we've got a lot of work to do. The good news is that the pipeline has gotten grown and gotten better. The next thing that we need to talk about is how to retain those students that are getting certificated and entering the workforce. So, I will now hand it over to Devon.
Yes, so now that we've talked about the shortage, we can kind of talk about the pipeline. I saw some of you had the pipeline report open today, which was really exciting for me to see, and hopefully you've had a chance to read it, but we can go ahead and go over some of those highlights. So, to start, this bar chart is looking at the technical employers. And you'll see kind of the top 3 are repair stations, air carriers, and general aviation. Certified mechanics are about 1/3 of all technical personnel across those 3 majors. And you'll see that non-certified technicians are kind of a bigger chunk. We've talked about earlier, this morning, some of those pathways of being able to go into some of the high school programs and getting hired on right after. And interesting this year from the survey, we saw that there was an 8% decrease in mechanics employed in general aviation. But on the other side of that, we saw an 8% increase in mechanics employed by air carriers and repair stations. And if you look the last little blue line on the very right, AMTS, only 1% of certified mechanics work in A&P schools, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. So here are some of the statistics of certified mechanics broken out kind of by the pathways. So there was a new record back in 2023 when we did this report of 9,400 new certificates were issued last year, which is kind of a big growth from the year prior at a little over 32%. And I want to touch on that light blue line there, which is the pathway of military experience. So the military pathway for new mechanics certification since about 2021 has continued to double-digit growth. So some of that work with ATEC, and I know that I think there's a breakout session about it tomorrow as well, but really showing how that incentive has been helping, and we hope to see it continue to grow. Here we talked about this morning, this is that bar chart on the right is that less than 3% population are women chart. So you can see the dark blue at the top. It's 2.8% in 2023, which is only tenths of digits up from the previous years. So even though the graduate population of women is increasing a little bit over the larger general population of the certified mechanics, it's really not increasing that much. I did note something today from one of the earlier talks was that racial and ethnic minorities and foreign national graduates have increased quite a bit from the year prior. So racial and ethnic minorities almost doubled, 4 nationals did double, and I kind of made a note to myself that I would love to see what the results of this ATEC survey report out about that, given some of the topics we talked about with James earlier today. So this slide is bringing back those 3 main employers: repair stations, general aviation, and operators, and where the 2023 graduates ended up in those sectors. And I think just kind of a takeaway from this slide is that 1/3 of graduates have accepted job offers outside of their geographic locations. So they're going where those hubs are, they're going where the demand is. And also that those 3 main employers take account for 75% of new graduate hires into the industry as well. Here talks about kind of the successful things for recruiters in trying to attract talent. The top 2 is tuition reimbursement and student job opportunities, which both of these to me really just say that financial support really is super appealing to everyone, but also historically underrepresented groups. So on top of just scholarships, also student job opportunities can also give them kind of job experience while they're also getting their certification as well. Okay, and then this year's survey asked a different question than before, and it kind of goes in junction with what the barriers were to those that are maintaining a mechanic certification. So the top for, as long as I've been doing the survey, has been fear of testing, and I think we've made really good headway on that with some of the Part 147 reforms. Being able to take the exam directly after that portion of the curriculum, or just a knowledge test after that portion of the curriculum, I think has shown kind of an increase of certification and probably has helped maybe that fear of testing a little bit. And the second one is inaccessible DMEs. We've definitely been having this conversation a ton since I've been here. The lack of DMEs is reported for 1 out of 5 of schools, and we project that the population needs to expand by 30% to accommodate all graduates. I know that ATEC is doing some work as well with the FAA to try to get some ODA reforms to try to help that initiative as well. And here I want to look at just this increase in school enrollment, but also look at it in contrast with the authorized enrollment that school has. So enrollments has rose over 5% since the year prior, which is great because it really is, just as we just talked about, highlighting the positive impact of all the initiatives. However, you'll see this kind of dip on the light blue, the authorized enrollment the past 2 years. And that is, we believe, highly driven by this lack of adequate faculty that we've been talking about. You can only teach so many students if you don't have the faculty there. So also with the demand we talked about with Livia, that we expect a growth rate of 5% annually is needed to try to keep up with the pace of demand as well. And here we're going to go into some of the barriers to growth within schools. So, recruiting, marketing, and advertising, program awareness, and adequate faculty are ranked as almost evenly as the top 2 at 1 out of every 2 schools reported it. And I think there's some really great initiatives going to address both of these concerns. We have Choose Aerospace, and helping deploy curriculum, going into high schools, as well as trying to address the faculty challenges to provide the resources for retirees being able to newly transition into instructor roles as well. Okay, now we can sum it up so we can get you guys to your beer hopefully soon. So, first, There is this MRO super cycle that we're talking about. So there's a slow supply chain, production issues, which is making airlines, operators keeping their aircraft in longer, they're older, and they're using them more to try to keep up with this increased demand. So this combination of both has led to increased turnaround times, tighter capacity, and definitely just a strong MRO demand. And as it was kind of mentioned before by Livia, our market intelligence team also does an MRO survey every year, and we're just now starting to release that report soon. And like hand over hand, all the MROs are reporting exactly this, that they're having a hard time attracting enough workers, they're having a hard time with turnaround times, and everything is just so tight there. So next is the manpower shortage, which is, as we all know, kind of post-COVID challenges, and we expect it to worsen over the next 10 years. We expect it to kind of peak, I think, by almost 20% in 2028, that supply and demand gap, and then kind of go back to a baseline, but still over the next 10 years will not close. And we also look at the inexperience of these new employees, basically having to take 3 years to become just as productive as experienced technicians. We do see an increase in school enrollments, which is great, and it's very encouraging, but it is not the 15% annual growth we need to see to meet those workforce needs, as well as the adequate faculty we talked about. So to be able to increase enrollments, we need to have enough faculty to be able to support doing so. And then lastly, I want to bring in kind of the brighter note, all the amazing work that has been done, enhancing enrollment with programs like Choose Aerospace, scholarships to go with those, financial incentives we looked at before, recruiting women and people of color, trying to ease the pathway for military veterans, and I think all of those will continue to and will definitely contribute to trying to address the challenges that we're seeing.
Cool, thanks. I wanted to highlight also, some of the things that we heard today, and it's kind of neat going at the end of the day instead of the beginning. So we heard about, partnering with industry to get more training for the new hires, right, and how that's working and trying to make them, try to speed up that productivity ramp. So it's really neat to see all the ATEC initiatives really starting to make an impact, and more to go, I think. Questions? I saw a big yawn. I know, death by PowerPoint. It's what we do.
Yeah, well, good. So one of the things that was interesting to me, at least when we saw it, is that we've had, the percentage of increase in A&P schools, we'd have to look at the numbers, but my guess is like 10% year over year for the last 3 years, which we haven't seen in forever, and yet the enrollments. And some of that is because you're new schools, and you're not necessarily, onboarding them as fast as maybe we need, but also that it's not necessarily, yes, geographically speaking, like there are areas where we need more A&P schools, but when we look at least the numbers, we know that it can help increase enrollment across the board. I know a lot of you are on wait lists, or you can increase enrollment because you have limitations in the facility or instructors or what have you. But if we could really maximize enrollment across the network of schools that we have now, it's not so much about, hey, let's add more and more A&P schools. It's about how can we best utilize the capacity that we have, which is sort of interesting, at least, by the numbers. So we use that, and when we create initiatives to help facilitate growth, like where should we be putting our resources? So those types of things are just interesting to see.
Yeah, I think this year we're going to ask a couple questions about that demand, supply, student load factor mismatch, maybe regional mismatch that we're going on. Well, that's the working theory. We want to try to see what's going on there. And I think the other thing that we're going to dig a little bit more into, that was interesting conversation back at the fly-in, is If they're not going into aviation, where are they going, right? And what are some of the other ways that we can attract and retain them besides throwing money and scholarships and that kind of thing at them? Lindsay.
Sure. So they kind of tie us back to that executive actions panel from earlier today. One of the points that you guys made is that historically underrepresented groups helping to attract those will help this problem. I've been hearing anecdotally just from different people at the show that this has impacted like scholarship things in terms of like scholarships related to DEI and whatever else. Do you think that's going to maybe potentially stagnate some of these numbers or have us go backwards?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully not from the DEI standpoint, right? Because we're making some progress, but not nearly enough progress. I do think it, and we'll run an updated. So this is the 2024 numbers. So we'll run an updated shortage report here, imminently. And I do think a lot of these actions are going to, at least in the near term, exacerbate a little bit of the gap for the reasons we were talking about, right? If we have students that are coming here, they may return to other countries to work. Getting workers from international places, like the entire world has a shortage of technicians right now, right? But we were able to attract a lot of them previously here. That may not be a successful avenue anymore. We have to go back. The other challenge that we're having right now is, and this isn't recent, this is from last year, is one of our good data sources on the FAA website is no longer available. So, but yeah, I would expect that to have a negative effect on this and make things worse, at least in the near term, right? But it's not great because we're already in the crunch.
Our good regulatory juror, I don't know where Sean is, has been emailing the FAA like at least.
Sean, where are you? Thank you.
Yeah,
You're like
trying to get the data.
Poke them every couple of weeks, for which I appreciate.
It may not work, but he's not here to tell him we said thanks.
So, in years past, one of the big barriers to getting the license was the testing. And I didn't hear you talk about that today. Is that because, maybe I just missed that, but...
Yeah, we went kind of fast. That is definitely still one of the barriers, is the testing.
Okay, so my question was going to be, is that being mitigated? What solutions are impacting that? Or is it just the lack of instructors has overtaken that as one of the top barriers? Is that still a problem?
Are you talking about access to testing being a barrier?
No, I'm not talking about the DMEs. In previous years, maybe last year, one of the biggest barriers was awareness. And then the second biggest barrier was the students were intimidated to take the test. It wasn't that they didn't have access to the DMEs. That's been a problem. So unless you just went through it. Never mind then. All right, thank you.
And I think maybe, so one of the biggest barrier to growing enrollment historically has been awareness. After barriers given Part 147, which went from the top to the very bottom. So it took care of that one. Now it's awareness, which is why we are trying, you guys are doing your own good work in the communities. We are trying to support those efforts through things like Choose Aerospace. On the testing thing, the thing that we're trying to focus on most really for us as a trade association is access to DME, since that's something that we can really address by policy.
Yeah, I think maybe that didn't come across in this, is that the reforms really had an impact on that.
Yeah, I was trying to find out what we did well so that we could continue to focus on those things.
Yeah, we have a breakout tomorrow. Mr. Call, we're talking, and we did it last year. It was the most popular breakout we had, other than the FAA sessions, was how do I increase my rates of certification? And I think we'll do that year over year. And so if you have good best practices and you want to be on the panel next year, come to that. Jim will be on it, and we've got some other folks talking about best practices for testing. We're still at 60% of all students that are getting their A&P mechanics, or all graduates that are getting certificated. So still a lot of work to do there. A lot of schools are doing it really well. Other questions?
placement after graduation, something about 41%. That doesn't mean 41% of graduates have a job at graduation. That means they have that in aviation. Can you talk about the leak to other industries? Is that, I just feel like part of that is missing out of this.
Yes, and that's kind of what we were talking about, that we want to, in your survey that is forthcoming in a few weeks, we're going to ask a question about, of those that are graduating and don't go to aviation, where do they go, right? Because we're not, as you see, 41% of graduates had a job offer going directly, but where's the other 60%, right? We cannot afford to lose them to other industries with this big of a workforce challenge.
Hi, talking about a shortage of qualified instructors. Is anybody thinking towards strategies to allow them to do more, such as looking at like competency-based education, blending, synchronous hands-on, here's how you do the thing training with, asynchronous knowledge type training, kind of get more out of the instructor's time effectively?
Crystal, that's a you question.
Well, I was just saying, if anybody has best practices in that space, come present at the conference next year. So we did try to do, so you can do competency-based training, CPT, whatever, now under new Part 147. Obviously, you have your accreditors that also have a say in how you teach. But for aviation, maintenance is so new, it didn't seem like there was a lot out there yet, at least from a informal survey that I had done. So I think, so here's a call. Looking for those kind of ideas and sharing of best practices. So if you do those sorts of innovative, you can certainly talk about it now and come up, and would love to do a breakout next year on those types of initiatives.
I think we heard a couple of ideas too from the operators themselves, as far as using their own staff to supplement or try to use training or do mentoring. So that's pretty innovative and new too. We'd love to hear more about people doing anything like that.
Yes, I'll add to that. I think it's an I think it's an awareness. I know when I retired from the industry, I just assumed that Part 147s had the curriculum and the staffing and all that, and I was happy to just retire, but my wife had other ideas. So, and then I learned that we're way underperforming in that area, partly because of awareness. And this is, as a retiree, I wasn't aware. Now, second, I was going back to the job placement graph. We talked about those that are graduating a program and then not going into did we break that down by how many of those actually got their license and then did not go into the industry, or those that graduated from the 147 school and never got their license and went somewhere else?
We didn't break that down, so you guys remind me. So we asked of your graduates, how many got certificated? And then we asked of your graduates, how many went into aviation and each of these sectors?
But that's a good idea. We will rejig that flow.
Okay, so we have a draft survey, so if you'd love to mark it up.
How about that? There we go. I'm going back to your survey. You're adding a question about who's leaving aviation. What I would like to see as well is who's staying in aerospace that's not aviation, because we get a lot of space companies out there now. And then who else is then leaving the aerospace industry altogether to go work on wind turbines or ships or whatever else, right? So there's a different category there, so that we're not losing track, but they're still connected to aerospace.
Yeah, and we as a firm, we do a lot of work. All over Wyman do a lot of work in the space sector as well, and they are doing similar work in the space workforce challenges. And so one of the things that we're working on over the next couple of months is trying to figure out how many of those same resources everybody's trying to grab to really size the problem. So more to come there, but that's a really good point. We will be sure to. Yeah, and like we said, we've got draft survey ready to go. So if anyone else has anything that they're curious about, let us know. Of course, it's just more questions for you all to fill out, but as you see, it's really good stuff that we can learn on, and I think ATEC has a great track record of actually delivering and trying to close the gap on some of these issues.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I was just curious, how many get in the industry in our field here and say after 2 or 3 years they leave? Can you track that at all?
That's hard, right? Because that's just worker numbers. So like in our shortage, if you go back to shortage slide, in the shortage slide, we have, we have assumptions and data on employment from places like BLS and the Bureau of Transportation Statistics. IATA has a number as well. But to do that, we'd have to talk to every single employee in the industry, right? So we've got some assumptions on how many are leaving and that kind of thing, but it's not that granular. And right now, what's driving the peak in this gap is there's still a retirement bow wave that's, we're really starting to enter it now. It probably started right before COVID, and COVID spiked it up a little bit faster, and here's another bow wave coming of retirees. But those leaving in the early curriculum, I'm not sure. I know that that's an issue for like women technicians. They leave after a few years. Typically, actually women in just STEM fields in general, but not sure about the general workforce.
All right, thank you. Big hand for the ladies.